For a man whose name alone can headline a movie, you'd think Leonardo DiCaprio never hears the word no. Yet, as he hits 50, a fascinating set of stories reveals the opposite. While millions adore him, a surprising number of women in his real life have kept their distance, thrown a bit of shade, or walked out of his orbit altogether. Some saw a side of Leo that didn't match the glamorous image. Others became unintentionally linked to him in moments they'd rather forget. And a few found themselves in tense, dramatic situations that left lasting marks, literally. So who are the women who turned him away? Let's find out. Growing up on Hollywood's dark side, Leonardo Wilhelm DiCaprio's story doesn't begin with the typical Hollywood dream of packing up, leaving home, and heading west. For him, the journey started right at the center of it all. Born on November 11, 1974 in Los Angeles, he grew up in the neighborhoods of Echo Park and Los Feliz, surrounded by the city's turbulence, creativity, and constant motion. He shared his childhood with a stepbrother, Adam Ferrar, with whom he had a close, brotherly bond. Even early on, those around Leo seemed to sense he was a natural performer. He later recalled vivid memories of crashing stages before concerts in downtown LA, grabbing imaginary microphones, breakdancing, and imitating friends of his parents. It was clear that entertaining came as naturally to him as breathing. His name, though, came from a place far from Hollywood. The story goes back to his parents' honeymoon in Italy, long before he was born. While standing in front of a Leonardo da Vinci painting inside Florence's famed Uffizi Gallery, his unborn self began kicking energetically. His father took it as a sign, and the name stuck. In a way, it felt like destiny choosing him, not the other way around. Leo's parents, George and Irmeline DiCaprio, came from different worlds. George, a writer and underground comic book artist from New York with Italian heritage, lived a creative, free-spirited life. Irmeline, born and raised in Germany, worked as a secretary and provided steadiness and warmth. The two met in New York a decade before Leo was born. Although their romantic relationship didn't last, they separated when he was about a year old. They never officially divorced. Instead, they remained extraordinarily close and raised Leo together, sharing equal time and offering unwavering support as he grew. Despite living close to the glamour of Hollywood, DiCaprio's neighborhood was rougher than most imagine. Years later, he described Echo Park at the time as a dangerous place, a community struggling with poverty, crime, drugs, and violence. He remembered walking down the street for candy, only to be confronted by men offering every drug imaginable. Prostitutes, fights, and constant tension were part of the daily backdrop. Growing up in that environment meant learning to stand up for himself early. Small for his age, he often felt overlooked, so he pushed back hard, sometimes too hard. He picked fights he couldn't win, talked back to kids bigger than him, and let a tough exterior hide the frustration he felt. But underneath that bravado, he deeply respected his parents. He often expressed how grateful he was for the freedom they gave him. In his eyes, they were the reason he survived Hollywood's pressures later in life. As a child, DiCaprio was bursting with restless creativity. He was hyperactive, full of ideas, and rarely interested in traditional schoolwork. His parents even wondered at one point if he might become a painter because of his intense focus on creative expression. His father once joked that Leo seemed wired differently from everyone else, as if he were an alien with a world of energy they couldn't quite understand. By the time he reached John Marshall High School in Los Feliz, it became clear that Leo wouldn't follow a conventional path. Acting called to him more strongly than anything else. As a junior, he made a bold decision. He dropped out, dedicated himself to acting classes, and threw himself into auditions with relentless determination. He chased opportunity with a fearlessness that would eventually define his entire career. And though he left school early, he later completed his GED, closing that chapter on his own terms. A rising star's first big break. Most people know Leonardo DiCaprio as one of Hollywood's biggest stars, but surprisingly, a lot of his early inspiration came from someone much closer to home, his older stepbrother, Adam Ferrar. Adam had started acting young, picking up commercial gigs and even landing a role in the original Battlestar Galactica. He later explained that it was this early success that sparked Leo's curiosity. DiCaprio hadn't enjoyed school much, but when he saw Adam earning real money and getting tutored on set, he immediately wanted to try the same path. So, at just 5 years old, Leonardo DiCaprio went after his first acting job on a children's show called Romper Room. And here's where the story takes an almost unbelievable turn. Despite the superstar he would one day become, the young actor was reportedly fired from the show for misbehavior. But instead of giving up, he followed in Adam's footsteps and kept pushing, eventually landing another role at age 14. He later remembered his very first paid job, a Matchbox car commercial, where he played a tiny gangster with slicked back hair. It was a nerve-wracking experience, but it also gave him his earliest lesson in acting. Once the lines were memorized, everything else in the scene became much easier. It was advice he would carry forward and eventually pass on to other aspiring actors. Throughout his early teens, DiCaprio appeared in commercials for household brands like Kraft and Bubble Yum, many of which still float around in online compilations. But the first real moment that introduced him to a wider audience came through television. He was cast as a homeless boy on the hit comedy series Growing Pains. Alan Thicke, the show's star, was stunned by the young newcomer's talent and even tried to convince the producers to expand DiCaprio's role. That didn't come to pass, but Thicke was absolutely certain the young actor was destined for remarkable things. In one of those uncanny Hollywood coincidences, Growing Pains had also featured another future superstar years earlier, Brad Pitt. The two never appeared together on the show, but they would famously share the screen decades later in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Looking back at his time on the series, DiCaprio admitted the memories were a bit blurry. It had, after all, been many years. During his early rise, DiCaprio carried a vivid memory of encountering one of his heroes, River Phoenix. At 18, he spotted Phoenix at a Halloween party. Before he could work up the courage to say hello, Phoenix left for the Viper Room. A night that ended in tragedy. It became one of those haunting moments that stayed with DiCaprio throughout his life. Like many actors, DiCaprio began with humble roles. His official feature film debut came in Critters 3, released directly to video in 1991, just after he turned 17. The film itself was far from prestigious, but it certainly didn't slow him down. His talent was so evident during auditions for This Boy's Life that Robert De Niro personally chose him for a co-starring role, a remarkable endorsement for such a young performer. Soon after, DiCaprio delivered the performance that truly changed everything, his role as Arnie Grape in the 1993 film What's Eating Gilbert Grape. His portrayal of a young man with a cognitive disability was so powerful that it earned him his first Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Yet behind the scenes, things weren't entirely smooth. His co-star, Johnny Depp, later admitted he had been going through a difficult time and hadn't been particularly warm toward the rising young actor. From there, DiCaprio kept building his momentum with roles in The Basketball Diaries and Total Eclipse. But despite how promising his career looked, he still endured plenty of hardship. He later reflected on the constant rejection he faced early on, explaining that it had fueled a lifelong drive to prove himself, something he never wanted to lose. A major turning point arrived in 1996 when Australian director Baz Luhrmann cast him in his stylish modern adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. Luhrmann even flew DiCaprio to Australia to convince him to join the project, which offered only a modest salary. DiCaprio didn't mind. He had never been motivated by big paychecks. What he hadn't expected, though, was the chaos of the production. Filming in Mexico came with food poisoning, widespread illness, and even frightening incidents involving local crime. One crew member was reportedly kidnapped, and several people became seriously sick. Despite the turmoil, the movie became a hit and cemented DiCaprio's status as a global heartthrob. Interestingly, his co-star, Claire Danes, later reflected on her experience working alongside him, even after spending 4 months together on set. she still felt he remained something of a mystery, a sentiment that only added to the mythic aura forming around the young actor. When confidence nearly cost Leonardo everything. In 1997, Titanic hit theaters like a tidal wave, instantly transforming Leonardo DiCaprio into one of the biggest stars on the planet. Looking back, more than 25 years later, it's almost impossible to picture anyone else standing on the bow of that ship, shouting those famous words, or floating in the icy water as audiences begged Rose not to let go. Before Titanic, DiCaprio was already riding high after Romeo plus Juliet, firmly crowned as the ultimate teen heartthrob. But behind the scenes, the role of Jack Dawson wasn't locked in at all. Ethan Hawke had auditioned, and even he later admitted that watching the frenzy around Titanic made him secretly wonder what might have happened if he had landed the part. Matthew McConaughey was another strong contender, and he walked out of his audition with Kate Winslet convinced he had nailed it. Of course, he didn't. And here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Leonardo DiCaprio nearly sabotaged his own chance at becoming Jack. Director James Cameron revealed years later that DiCaprio arrived for his screen test overflowing with confidence. He charmed the entire room during his initial meeting, but when Cameron asked him to read lines with Kate Winslet, DiCaprio froze. He hadn't realized this meeting involved an actual audition. He pushed back, insisting that he didn't do readings. Cameron didn't hesitate. He simply thanked him for coming and began to end the meeting. Only then did DiCaprio realize that if he didn't read, he wouldn't get the part. Not even close. Cameron laid it out clearly. This was going to be a massive, years-long project. There was no room for uncertainty. If DiCaprio wanted the role, he had to prove he was Jack Dawson. So he read, and the moment the camera rolled, everything shifted. The second Cameron called action, DiCaprio transformed. Kate Winslet lit up opposite him, the energy between them cracking through the room. Cameron later described it as if storm clouds had suddenly parted, revealing a clear beam of sunlight. In that instant, he knew he had found his Jack. Interestingly, despite the confidence he projected, DiCaprio later admitted that he had been nervous about signing on to such a massive production. He had always gravitated towards smaller, character-driven films. Big blockbusters in his mind relied too heavily on spectacle, but Titanic's script, its emotional core, and the depth of the character pulled him in. He realized he couldn't walk away from something with that much heart. What followed became nothing short of cinematic history. Titanic didn't just break box office records, it shattered them, holding the title of the highest-grossing film in the world for more than 2 decades. For DiCaprio and Winslet, the movie became an unforgettable milestone, the kind of success that comes only once in a career. DiCaprio later reflected on that period, admitting that he had absolutely no idea what kind of fame awaited him. He didn't understand what global recognition truly meant until it hit him. And he acknowledged something else. The phenomenon of Titanic could never be recreated, nor would he ever seek to repeat it. In the end, the film that almost slipped through his fingers became the one that changed everything. The dark side of DiCaprio's fame. Now, the runaway success of Titanic didn't just make Leonardo DiCaprio a global superstar, it turned him into the defining young heartthrob of the late 1990s. And while that level of fame looked glamorous from the outside, DiCaprio felt boxed in by the noble romantic image that audiences attached to Jack Dawson. He admitted to Esquire that he reshaped his personal life on purpose, trying to shake off that polished, heroic persona. And he seemed to enjoy every minute of dismantling it. This shift set the stage for one of the most infamous chapters of his early career. DiCaprio soon became the unofficial leader of a hard-partying crew of young Hollywood men. They called themselves the P Posse, a group that included close friends like Tobey Maguire, Lucas Haas, Kevin Connolly, magician David Blaine, and director Harmony Korine. In the nightlife of the 1990s, they were everywhere, loud, reckless, and legendary. It's worth remembering that the culture of that era was very different from today's. In the post-Me Too world, it's nearly impossible to imagine a major actor openly embracing a nickname like that while tearing through clubs around the world. But throughout the 90s and into the early 2000s, DiCaprio and his circle did exactly that. Their behavior was even captured on film in a little-known project called Don's Plum. Shot in 1995 and 1996, before Titanic and before the group's fame exploded. The film was a low-budget black-and-white indie built almost entirely on improvisation. Producer Dale Wheatley once described it as a kind of love letter to their friendship. But what ended up on screen revealed a much darker edge. The story is simple. A group of friends meets every week in a Los Angeles diner, each time with a different group of women. The improvised nature of the movie exposed the crude, often misogynistic behavior that the posse became infamous for. One of DiCaprio's outbursts in the film became a defining example of just how harsh the tone could get. It was so revealing, in fact, that both DiCaprio and Maguire spent years trying to block the film from ever being released. According to reports from The Guardian, the two actors fought aggressively to bury the project. Producer David Stutman claimed they carried out a coercive campaign to prevent its release, and he eventually filed a $10 million lawsuit. He also alleged that DiCaprio actually liked the film at first, while Maguire worried that his unscripted performance came across as too personal and too close to real life. Despite all the battles, Don's Plum did eventually surface online for free viewing. Tension around the group's behavior didn't stop there. Journalist Nancy Jo Sales, who once tried to interview DiCaprio, later wrote about receiving a crude voicemail from an unidentified caller connected to his circle, a message implying that she would need to make a deal to get the interview, with a reference to the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal. Incidents like this only added to DiCaprio's growing reputation as Hollywood's most notorious young playboy, and that reputation stretched far beyond his love life. The original 1998 New York Magazine profile that helped popularize the posse's name detailed antics like DiCaprio and his friends throwing grapes at paparazzi from a hotel window. A report from The Guardian added an even stranger episode. During the filming of Gangs of New York, DiCaprio reportedly hurled horse manure at photographers. His co-star, Daniel Day-Lewis, and director Martin Scorsese were said to be so fed up with the non-stop chaos that Day-Lewis actually moved hotels to escape the noise. Even the journalist who wrote that 1998 New York Magazine piece wasn't spared. She described receiving a drunken voicemail from the 24-year-old actor, laying out an explicit condition for agreeing to an interview, one that echoed the same Lewinsky reference the other reporter encountered. It became yet another example of the brazen, often uncomfortable behavior surrounding the actor at the peak of his early fame. And then things escalated even further. In 2003, The Guardian covered a lawsuit filed by Roger Wilson, the ex-boyfriend of actress Elizabeth Berkley. He claimed that members of the posse assaulted him at DiCaprio's instruction after Berkley reportedly turned the actor down. A representative for DiCaprio denied the allegations, but the incident added a violent layer to the group's already controversial reputation. Inside Hollywood's biggest money scandal, Leonardo DiCaprio is widely known today as one of Hollywood's most outspoken climate activists. And yes, his frequent use of private jets has drawn plenty of criticism for being hypocritical. But beyond that debate lies a much more complicated and far more intriguing story about the charitable foundation he created and the shadowy scandal it ultimately became tangled in. The Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation began in 1998 with a simple goal: support conservation efforts around the world. For years, it operated on a small scale. Then, in 2008, it made a major shift by joining the California Community Foundation as a donor-advised fund. That move changed everything. A donor-advised fund, or DAF, functions almost like a financial black box. It shields nearly all financial details from public view, making it incredibly hard, sometimes impossible, to see where the money is coming from or where it's going. Even the IRS has warned that DAFs can be exploited for sketchy practices, from questionable tax deductions to secretly funneling economic benefits back to donors. That lack of transparency would eventually place DiCaprio and his foundation under intense scrutiny. The pressure hit its peak in 2016. During one of the foundation's high-profile fundraising galas, on July 20th, the LDF brought in a staggering $45 million in donations in a single night. The room was filled with power players, from wealthy oligarchs like Mohammed Al-Turki and Dmitry Rybolovlev to Hollywood icons such as Robert De Niro, Scarlett Johansson, Bono, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. But on that exact same day, the U.S. Department of Justice filed a sweeping complaint that opened the door to a massive federal investigation. At the center of it was a multi-billion-dollar embezzlement scheme involving Malaysia's state-owned 1MDB fund. And right there, pulled directly into the narrative, was the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation. The DOJ even referred to DiCaprio as Hollywood Actor One in its filings, though he was never charged with any crime. The allegations were astonishing. Investigators claimed the foundation had been used to help launder money stolen from Malaysia. Funds that were supposed to support national oil exploration were instead being diverted into luxury real estate, artwork, and Hollywood productions. The FBI publicly called the entire operation the largest kleptocracy case in history. The biggest source of suspicion came from DiCaprio's close relationship with Malaysian producer Riza Aziz. Aziz's company, Red Granite Pictures, financed DiCaprio's hit film The Wolf of Wall Street. But according to the DOJ, an eye-watering $238 million used to bankroll the movie allegedly came from the 1MDB fund. Aziz was later arrested for money laundering in 2019. And that same year, DiCaprio quietly testified before a grand jury about his connection to all of this. The proceeding was sealed, so nobody knows what he actually said. What did leak out was surprising. DiCaprio had owned a Picasso painting worth $3.2 million, purchased with stolen funds by Lo Taik Joe, better known as Joe Lo, the elusive businessman believed to be the mastermind behind the entire 1MDB scandal. Lo's story takes this saga from dramatic to almost unbelievable. He lived like a character ripped straight out of DiCaprio's own movies, throwing extravagant parties, spending unimaginably large sums of money, and surrounding himself with celebrities. According to the book Billion Dollar Whale, he burned through $85 million on parties in less than a year. And according to federal investigations, he even paid DiCaprio $250,000 simply to appear alongside him. Lo's influence didn't end with parties. He became extremely close to DiCaprio and the foundation, reportedly donating significant sums and showering the actor with luxury gifts. Despite his lack of traditional Hollywood charm, Lo possessed something even more powerful: unfathomable wealth. He and DiCaprio exchanged thousands of messages and even had pet nicknames for each other. Lo reportedly called him Dog, while DiCaprio referred to Lo as "my man." Investigative reports later revealed that DiCaprio had been paid to party internationally with Lo beginning in late 2009, including an $11 million gambling spree in Las Vegas. And the gifts were astonishing: a $9.2 million Basquiat painting, a $3.2 million Picasso, and even Marlon Brando's Oscar for On the Waterfront. All of those items later had to be surrendered to the U.S. government. The greatest irony in all of this is almost cinematic. The same financier who bankrolled DiCaprio's lavish outings was also pouring millions of allegedly stolen dollars into the film that portrayed one of the most infamous financial criminals in movie history. DiCaprio returned the illegal gifts, but the acclaim he earned for The Wolf of Wall Street is something he can never give back. So where does DiCaprio stand in this complicated web of money, influence, and international corruption? According to the FBI, he maintained that he had no idea Lo's wealth was fraudulent. He believed the money was coming from Abu Dhabi, claiming that Lo worked for a mysterious figure he described as the Whale of Whales, someone he never actually identified. DiCaprio said he even had his team run a background check on Lo, which reportedly came back clean. But once journalists began publishing explosive exposés about Lowe and the 1MDB scandal, everything changed. DiCaprio distanced himself immediately and chose to cooperate fully with federal investigators. He turned over the gifts, shared information, and stepped back from the man who had once been a central figure in his social and professional orbit. The mystery behind DiCaprio's dating pattern. Leonardo DiCaprio's love life has always been a story in itself, full of glamour, mystery, and more than a little drama. Over the years, he's been linked to some of the most recognizable women in Hollywood. And while some romances were light and carefree, others were far more complicated. Take 1998, for example. That year, DiCaprio reportedly had a secret affair with Czech supermodel Eva Herzegovina. At the time, she was still married to Bon Jovi drummer Tico Torres, a detail later revealed by Us Weekly. The same outlet also connected DiCaprio to brief flings with Naomi Campbell, Helena Christensen, and Liv Tyler. Short, high-profile sparks that never quite turned into long-term flames. But not every relationship was smooth sailing. One of the clearest examples was his 15-month romance with Kristen Zhang in the late 90s. According to the New York Daily News, Zhang ended things because she had grown tired of DiCaprio's ever-present entourage, a posse of young model hounds, as the outlet described them. And then, of course, there's the running joke that nearly everyone in Hollywood knows, the idea that DiCaprio simply does not date women older than 25, despite growing attention on age gaps and power dynamics in the entertainment industry. He seems determined to stick to his pattern. Someone online even decided to prove it. A Reddit user created a data chart mapping DiCaprio's dating history from 1999 to 2019, using information pulled from British tabloids. The numbers painted a surprisingly consistent picture. As DiCaprio got older, the age of his girlfriends stayed almost exactly the same. The average age came in at about 22.9 years old. The chart also highlighted some of his best-known relationships, Gisele Bündchen, Bar Raffaelli, and Blake Lively, and revealed something striking. His two longest relationships, each lasting around 5 years, both ended when the women reached a certain age, Bündchen at 23 and Raffaelli at 25. Even his brief romance with Blake Lively fit the pattern, since she was 23 at the time. That unchanging age gap became a full-blown social media firestorm when DiCaprio was photographed with 19-year-old model Eden Polani. Users on X, formerly Twitter, were quick to react. Barrister Dr. Charlotte Proudman questioned why a man nearing 50 would be spending time with a teenager. Journalist Caitlin Moran joked that DiCaprio seemed stuck in his Titanic era, dating young women and relaxing on yachts as if frozen in time, and even quipped that he might need EMDR therapy. Conservative broadcaster Megyn Kelly also jumped in, bluntly criticizing the actor for continually dating women far younger than himself. Behind the scenes, though, an alleged insider offered a different explanation. According to a source quoted by Page 6, the reason DiCaprio avoids women older than 25 is tied to life expectations. By that age, the source claimed, many women begin thinking about settling down and starting a family, something DiCaprio has reportedly never wanted. The insider suggested that he tends to retreat the moment a partner approaches that age or begins seeking a deeper, more committed relationship. Some of his former partners have echoed similar sentiments. Kristen Zhang was said to have ended things because she felt DiCaprio wasn't ready to grow up. Gisele Bündchen later hinted in her memoir that their breakup stemmed from her desire to mature emotionally and break unhealthy habits, while he resisted change and preferred to stay the same. Over the years, DiCaprio has faced a steady stream of rumors that haven't always cast him in the best light. Yet one thing has remained remarkably constant: his unmistakable and widely debated dating pattern. At 50, Leonardo DiCaprio reveals the women who rejected him. Leonardo DiCaprio may have shared one of the most iconic screen partnerships of all time with Kate Winslet, but beyond that legendary bond, not every woman in Hollywood or the modeling world has walked away from him with warm feelings. For all the success, charm, and undeniable talent, DiCaprio has also left behind a trail of frustrated, heartbroken, and occasionally irritated women throughout his long bachelor era. So, who are the women who supposedly can't stand Leo? Well, that's definitely an exaggeration, but there are quite a few who've thrown some shade his way after things soured. And honestly, if someone managed to catch the attention of one of the world's most desirable men only to find themselves suddenly replaced, a little bitterness might come naturally. One of the most talked about cases is his relationship with German model Toni Garan. The two dated for just over a year before breaking up in December 2014. According to reports at the time, the final straw came when DiCaprio was spotted leaving a Florida party surrounded by roughly 20 women. For a young model trying to build a serious relationship, that kind of scene is more than enough reason to quietly bow out and pour a tall glass of moving on. Then there was the unforgettable moment at the 2016 Golden Globes involving Lady Gaga. As she made her way to the stage to accept her award, she brushed past DiCaprio's chair. His startled, wide-eyed reaction instantly became a viral meme. It looked like a harmless, funny moment, but the internet quickly ran wild, interpreting his expression as shade toward Gaga. Though DiCaprio later laughed off the whole situation, the viral frenzy briefly overshadowed her win. And knowing Gaga's love for the spotlight, it's easy to imagine she wasn't thrilled about sharing her big moment with a meme. Another figure often mentioned in conversations about DiCaprio's exes is Gisele Bündchen. After their high-profile breakup, she eventually married NFL superstar Tom Brady, and years later, she described sensing immediately that Brady was the one. The way she spoke about finding someone whose values aligned with her own sparked plenty of speculation. Many felt she was subtly contrasting that sense of alignment with what she didn't experience with DiCaprio, suggesting that while they were a glamorous couple, they weren't truly meant to last. And then there's the most extreme story of all, Aretha Wilson. At a Hollywood party years ago, she struck DiCaprio in the face with a bottle, leaving him with injuries that required 17 stitches. For an actor whose face is one of his most valuable assets, the attack was serious and shocking. Wilson, a former Canadian model, later claimed she mistook him for an ex-boyfriend who had wronged her. But realistically, mistaking Leonardo DiCaprio for anyone else seems almost impossible, raising questions about what was really going on in that moment.